Hey, squad members. It's Bob Harrison. I'm here tonight with you. I am going to be your only host for a while. We're hoping Mike gets his technical stuff fixed, but he's having some technical problems. I keep getting texts all day with tubes and wires. Hopefully the internet will get fixed up in Connecticut. But in the meantime, I'm going to start this off. I'm going to take a minute and I want to talk a little bit about the Marvels. We saw that movie this weekend. It was a lot of fun. There's been a lot of talk these days about the fact that it hasn't done as well as people expected. And I think that's unfair. I think that, we're in a situation today where people are being unfair with film. It was fun. It was inclusive for fans. It was inclusive for viewers. It was inclusive for people who love the MCU. It was inclusive for people who love comics. Is there superhero fatigue? Probably. I would say that's fair. That's fair, but I don't think that's fair to say that that's the problem. I don't think it's fair to say that the problem with this film is that it was female led. I don't think that's fair. I think that blockbusters today don't look like they did pre-pandemic. I think that if you look at today's movies, you look at, this year, Barbie was the biggest movie of the year. And that's what things used to look like. There was a big blockbuster or two or three maybe, but it wasn't every month that there was a new giant movie out there making $1 billion. That just wasn't the way it was. And for anybody, and to be honest, that was new at the time prior to the pandemic and frankly unsustainable. In today's economic climate, no one should be surprised that people aren't rushing to the theaters every 3 weeks to see a giant superhero movie. But don't let that take away from these fun, entertaining performances. The character Iman Vellani was amazing. I can't wait to see her career. I can't wait to see the things that they do going forward. It was fun. People should go see this movie. People should see this movie when they have the opportunity to. It doesn't have to be today. It doesn't have to be on the first weekend. There's plenty of holiday time with family and friends coming up. Go see the Marvels. It is what a superhero movie should be about. It is about trying to save the world and exploring who you are and making relationships. And it's all of the fun stuff. It's not about just how hard can you smash somebody or whose mother's name is like somebody else's mother's name or who killed your mother and all of that stuff. It's very much about, in a lot of ways, community, which is one of the things we love about the comic community and comic books in general. So that's my rant. That's my rant for today. I want to bring in our guest since my partner's not here tonight. I want to get to him as soon as possible. We have a lot of really cool things to talk about with our guest. Steve Orlando is a super talented writer and a friend of the show. He's written comics for just about every publisher in just about every genre. We're excited to have him back on the show to talk about his latest work, especially his latest release from TKO Studios that he co-wrote with the world-famous chef Jose Andres called Feeding Dangerously. And before I get ahead of myself and make any more mistakes, I'm going to bring in our guest. Hey, Steve. How are you?
I'm well. Very well.
Great. Can you hear me? Am I okay? Am I good on this mic? Great.
Absolutely, man.
Thank you for coming on early. Appreciate it. I want to get started though, and I would like to talk about feeding dangerously before we get too far into things. So let's bring that to the stage here. This book, I've read it. It just came out last week. And I believe I'm not sure where it is, TKO Studios. I will put in the chat a link to get the book. There's a couple of different places you can get it. And I want to say right now, and I'll probably say again, that $5 from every purchase of this book goes towards World Central Kitchen, towards feeding people in times of need. One of the taglines for the book is fires, hurricanes, volcanoes, floods, earthquakes. Food is hope. Can you talk to us about how this book came about?
Oh, no, I absolutely can. I was aware, for folks who don't know about Jose, he's a comic book fan, and he's relatively well known in the food world. He's one of the first people to do tapas restaurants in America. So if you've eaten at one of those ever, he sort of brought the idea here, even though, of course, they're not all owned by him now. He was one of the first people to do it. So he's been a big move maker, a history maker, going way back into the 90s. But he's also a big nerd and also loves comics and things like that. So actually, Jose and I first met, for folks who maybe watched Brian Fuller's show Hannibal from the early 2010s. Actually, he was a food advisor on that show. So every time Hannibal Lecter cooks a human being,
That's cool.
Actually Jose Andres designing, not with human meat, of course, the meals in the show. So that's actually the first time we talked.
You mentioned that before, and I heard you. I want to. So the concept is that the food that he had that was on the show that people had to eat was actual food that people could eat, but he made it look like it was humans, or is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, like, he designed the dishes themselves. I mean, they are,
Sure.
I mean, like, I guess not to remove the magic here, folks, but they were quite obviously using pork instead of
Right.
people.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, the idea specifically, I mean, Hannibal Lecter has always been a gourmand, but the idea, just because if it was a TV show versus a movie, was that you were going to get a lot more time, to see him cooking and these dinner parties that he throws, which you normally didn't see too much. You see him a bit in Red Dragon, for example, early on. But anyway, so Jose designed all that, and we spoke like a decade or more ago about that, and on Twitter, back when meaningful things could happen there. And we should definitely do something. I said, yes, we definitely should. And it's Twitter, so it lasted for about 5 seconds. Nothing came of it. But then fast forward to 2017, 2018, Jose's back in the news, feeding folks in Puerto Rico after they were hit by the hurricane that year. Millions and millions of meals, to the extent that he wrote a book about it called We Fed an Island, and which is a prose book. It's out there right now. Everybody should check it out. And I read the book. I was moved by it. And once again, he was talking about the book online. I quote tweeted him and I said, I'd love to adapt this. If that's something you like, let's talk. And he responded again. So this time I couldn't let it drop. I screen capped the conversation. I tracked down his agent and emailed him. And I said, look, if Chef is just, blowing smoke, that's totally fine. But if he's serious, here I am. And Jose himself emailed me back, revealed that he was a big comic book fan. And we started talking there. And within 6 months, I was within 6 months to a year, I was on the ground in Florida doing disaster relief myself. So that's kind of the effect he has on me.
Talk about that. How did that happen? Like, he's like, come here, and you went, and what was that experience like?
Well, we had a couple meetings. His office for his food, for his restaurant group, is in DC, and same for World Central Kitchen. So I'd gone down there once. We'd had multiple phone calls and things. This is the pre-Zoom era, before that was ubiquitous. But we had a meeting coming up where we had to finally make some decisions about how we were going to do the book. And I got a call on a Sunday. It was a Wednesday meeting, and I got a call on a Sunday, and it was Jose's assistant. He said, with this Hurricane Michael hitting down in Florida, Jose really wants to meet with you this week, but he's not going to, he's not going to be in DC. He's going to be in Florida. So he thinks the best way for you to learn about what we do is to just come do it yourself. But the thing is, you got to come today. So I'm, sitting in my apartment in Boston and sort of gazing through the wall and into my future and realizing that if I don't like go to the airport and buy a ticket and fly same day to Florida, this book is not going to happen. So I did it, and by late Sunday night, I was down in Florida and unloading Cisco trucks and things like that with the folks from World Central Kitchen. Stayed there until Thursday or Friday of that week because I was booked at Fayetteville Comic Con of all things, North Carolina. So, but I stayed as long as I could and was right in there doing it firsthand.
That's awesome. So when you've mentioned to me, and we've talked about this, you said this book is different from any other book you've done, and you've done it differently than any other book you've done. And I want to, before we get too far ahead, I want to call out Alberto Ponticelli, who did the art, and Giulia Brusco, who did the colors, and Thomas Maurer did the lettering. All high level work. It is just beautiful. I mean, I have my copy right here. It is amazing. It is a beautiful piece of literature. Mike Mignola cover. It's just amazing. So why is it different? Why was it different for you as a comic book writer to write this book than other books?
Well, for a long time I sort of referred to it as Terrence Malick's disaster movie graphic novel, because it's very contemplative. And when I say Terrence Malick, I really mean I'm really talking about Tree of Life and that storytelling style. But it's not really that. It's really, I'm not going to Mark Miller this and say it's the first of its kind, but it's the first I've seen in a while what I would describe as like a documentary graphic novel. And part and parcel to that is that, as you said, like this was produced unlike any other book. Every single page in Feeding Dangerously, and needless to say, nearly every single panel has a direct photo reference. It has every single character has a story behind them. And so writing this book, it was taking these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of images and videos provided by World Central Kitchen and by Jose, along with a story that they wrote up for every single one of them, even if it was brief, and seeing how we could blend this into a narrative. It was almost like the writing version of doing collage work in some ways, and seeing how you could form this into a narrative. And then, of course, for Alberto, I mean, I am confident in saying that it's been a lot. I can't think of a more work-intensive book than Feeding Dangerously. Even the artists most known for photo reference in comics probably are not doing it with every single panel. And if they are doing it with every single panel, by the way, they're probably adapting a photo reference to something that involves superheroes or something. Every single panel in this had to reference something real, had to tell the story of a real person. And it was a huge amount of work for me and, of course, for Alberto. But that's what makes it special. And that's where Jose's passion, and World Central Kitchen came through. It was hard. The book is 200 pages long. The book's over 200 pages long, and it could have easily been twice as long.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the point. You go through this, and the work that Alberto did, and you can tell that there's a story that he's telling. You can tell that there's care in the characters and the designs and what he's making. And if you know how comics are made, you know that there's some sort of photo reference involved in this. And you've mentioned that in the past. But even knowing that, it's gorgeous. He makes it his own. There's a certain style.
And that's the thing. Like I hesitate to even use the phrase photo reference, because I think that's often thought of as folks who will, take a drawing from Maxim and slap a superhero costume on it. It's not that, but Alberto's work is exactly what you were saying, not to directly reproduce, but to illuminate and enliven these images and these people and make them larger than life. While every panel has a reference, no panel is probably a direct one-to-one, because those references are there to give the feeling, give the details, and then do what we can do best in comics, which is not be beholden to a single shot or a single point of view. Comics can go places that a human being can't. we can't, we can't take a photo from inside the ground looking up at someone, at least not easily. Of course, the things are possible.
Sure.
But once we know the setting, we're limited only by Jose's imagination, my imagination, Alberto's imagination, Julia, and the ability to Julia Brusco, the colorist, and the
Yeah.
ability to tell that, to put that on the page, not necessarily in the exact way that it was taken as a photograph or as a video, but in the way that, the illuminated way that we wish it could be, and the way that is most gripping and most endearing.
Yeah. One of the things that people that I saw as I read the book, is that you set the narration in Jose's voice, right? And it is it is not a heroic story. It's very much the story that the narrator is telling is not for his benefit. It's not to tell his story. He's very much telling the story of the people that he encountered. And I find that to be incredibly important to the overall tone of the story. But by the same token, it's full of heroes. It's full of people caring for other people. It's heartbreaking. It's uplifting. I got to like the last page and I cried, and then I sent you a picture of it, and I'm like, I'm crying. You know, uh, but so like from that perspective, how hard was that to do, or how easy was it to do?
Well, I will tell you. So that specific thing is easier than you think, because when you meet Jose, and you yourself could talk about it, by the way, because you saw the live video that he sent
Yeah,
New York
absolutely.
Comic-Con. He's such a bold and instantly recognizable personality. I think you
Mhm.
kind of get him, the earnestness of him within seconds of meeting him. So imagine spending hours, days, and years with him. So that specific thing is actually relatively easy, because his style and personality is so unique, and in a way very simple. Not to say he's a simple man, Leonard Skinner style, but to say that his motivations, um, and I'm interested in what you thought when you saw the video with him in New York, actually, because you had not seen him before. I
Right.
think they're disarmingly simple. Sometimes to the effect, to the extent that you're almost dubious of them. But there's nothing behind the curtain. Like, there's no rug to be
Right.
pulled out. And I think that's what's special about him.
I'll tell you that when I was sitting there watching that video, I wanted to get on a plane and go help him. You know, like that's the demeanor that he produces. That he is that person that is so um, believes so much in what he's doing, and wants so much to do good. Like you can feel that, um, and to help. Like he's like we're all part of this community. It doesn't matter where you're from. You're human. We're all part of it. We live on this planet. We have to get along. I saw something recently, and I forgot to grab it and get the exact quote, but I saw something recently, and it was a George Carlin quote talking about how,
A very good reference anytime. So please go
of
on.
course, well, the concept was he was talking about how if all of a sudden we were dropped on this planet, the first thing that we would do is we would say, "Are you okay? Are we all okay? Okay, let's get something to eat." That would be the concept, and that's what's missing from the world that even before he passed. But like the concept of we need to take care of each other and make sure we're okay, and we need to feed each other. We need to make sure that we're okay. Um, and that level of human community is missing in the world in generally. But like when you see somebody like Jose who is actively putting his money where his mouth is, and going and putting the work in and putting himself in danger, and getting to the point where, hey, we belong to each other, and if we don't take care of each other, who are we?
Oh no, for sure. And I think, It's if folks take, I mean, there's a lot of things to take away from the book, but I was talking to doing one of the other interviews for it, and the fact is, like, I hope the thing that they do not that they take away the most is not necessarily about Jose himself, but about this
Sure.
idea that, like, doing good for people is not unattainable. You don't need to be a multi-millionaire chef with 15 restaurants to work with World Central Kitchen. You just need a plane ticket.
Right.
Like, and I think that sometimes, well, many things in life, but real, like, tangible good, quote unquote heroism. It's a loaded term. I try not to use it,
Well,
but real tangible good. Or I feel like we often think, well, that's something someone else does, right? Like I'm just, I just live in whatever. I live in Scranton, Pennsylvania. What can I do? But you can do stuff, like, that's the thing. I think that we hopefully this book shows folks that, like, that isn't some, like, highfalutin concept that you read about in the news. You don't have to read it about the news. You can be there and doing it. And there's a lot of messages in the book, but hopefully that is one of the main ones, because there's a little bit of that surreal moment, but then it's exactly as easy as it sounds. Take my story. I'm an asshole who writes comics, and all it took was that leap to be like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to go do it. And then
yeah.
in 2 hours you're down there in Florida, and it's as real as it gets, my man. Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, even in the book, there's that great example of in the Bahamas when they set up shop in Atlantis, and there were people who came and volunteered to help for this hurricane that was hitting the Bahamas because they were on vacation and they were there. That concept of, hey, I'm here. What can I do? What can I do to help? And again, I want to reiterate that this book is important. It's a fantastic piece. It's a beautiful piece of literature, beautiful piece of art, and $5 from every copy sold goes to World Central Kitchen to help people in need in the future. So it's definitely, it's holiday season, so if people are interested, and there's a link in the there's already one link, and we'll put another link later on in the chat where you can go get it, and please do. When it really, just talking about the book itself and the layout, like what type of perspective, and Sherry's asking, how important was the layout of the book? It's a landscape, movie style type book, how important was that in how
I'm
you
laughing because I'm laughing because there's a couple answers. So within the book itself, it's, unless I felt like we needed a double page splash for something, which we'll get to that in a second. I'm a type of person who likes to leave layout and things like that up to the visual artist I'm working with, because that's where they need to flex their muscles, right? So I try not to lean in on those things. That being said, for the overall format of the book, which, as folks can see, it's not a traditionally shaped comic book. It opens up. It's kind of like a double wide when you open it up, and that is important because we wanted to do what you can do best in comics, and that is one of those things is scale,
Right.
and that's very unique to comics. The double page splash is relatively unique in storytelling fiction. And you might say, Steve, what are you talking about? Like, IMAX screens exist. That's true, but IMAX screens can't magically get double the size they are for an even bigger moment that needs more emphasis.
Right.
So
right.
we wanted to make the book wider to enhance that widescreen feel, and then make use of that when there was a moment that really needed to be like that push, that boost to really get in people's faces. And I think, I don't have it in front of me right now, but I believe, like, one of the one that always springs to mind is, I think we did a double page splash for the aerial view in Puerto Rico, where they had the giant message scrawled on the streets. I believe it says "Necesitamos ayuda y agua."
Yep.
Or it's something in Iagua. I don't think it's help. But
But you have here's an example of it, like here.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like that format to show the scale and the awe is something.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what comics do that's really special. And I think that when folks come into the medium from outside, they recognize that and they get excited. So, but I was laughing mostly too because, to be clear, me, jackass Steve Orlando, who writes comics, could never get a book with this shape approved. But when you're working with a celebrity chef who won't take no for an answer, it's very easy to get a hardcover book that is shaped like no other book in the comic industry.
Correct. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. when you got to know Jose, Chef, what was the most surprising thing about who he was?
Well, you know what? No, I said it earlier, but it's the truth. It's the simplicity of the motivations, not of the man. You know, like I mean, just like he's not a saint. Just like us, he gets pissed off at people, so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Um, but no, I mean, when I was in, I think about just in comparison to everyone else, you know, that you know, his story in of itself is not unique, but the takeaways are, and that's actually what surprised me. We were in Florida, sitting in the back of his truck, smoking cigars, and I said, you know, Jose, why do you do this? You know, like, you know, there's plenty of other people with well, not plenty, but there's enough other people with wildly successful restaurant careers like your own, and they're not out here doing this. They're not out here like digging in the shit to get people fed, you know. And I said, why do you do it? And it's a moment in the book, so you already know, Bob. But he said when he was coming over here in the Spanish Navy, he was
Right.
reading Grapes of Wrath to work on his English, and he was like upper middle class, relatively affluent in Spain. Both his parents were nurses, and he said that reading Grapes of Wrath was the first time he ever really experienced poverty. He ever really experienced hunger, and he just decided right then that he was going to do what he could to make sure no one else within his power, that no one else has to go through that. And that's like I say, disarmingly simple. How many hundreds of thousands of students worldwide, at least in America, read that book sometime before college and think relatively nothing of it? With Jose, sometimes the motivations are really, really basic. But I think that's because he really engages with stories and with people, and that allows him to be affected by things. Even books that are 100 years old that nearly every American student reads and then puts down and probably doesn't think that much about again.
Right. I agree with you. I think that's fantastic. When you were there and seeing him in action, did that help with the translation of his story into this medium? Did that help you being there? Do you think that you could have told the story the way that you did if you hadn't been physically there?
No, I absolutely not. It is, you got to see the way that everything works. You got to put your hands in, you got to put your hands in the dirt. And in the case of Jose, like, yeah, the reason it was quote unquote easy is because I had seen firsthand the way he deals with people, the way he speaks with people, the way he thinks about things. Oftentimes motivated by something that happened like 30 years ago, but still acting on it in a way that I think the average person probably doesn't. So no, I mean, could I have done the book without this? Yeah. Would it have been what it is? Absolutely not. I mean, I said it on the panel in New York. I've said it places like, I think Jose, like he does, as I said, he's not a saint. None of us are perfect. I think he's very demanding of the people that work with him. And I can imagine it being very challenging working with him in the restaurant world.
Sure.
But that being said, when the setting is not the kitchen, or at least that kind of kitchen, when the setting is disaster relief, and he's just as demanding there, I think that's an asset because he will not take no for an answer. He won't. I mean, needless to say, from someone like me, but I was there as he was arguing with like one of the major people in FEMA and Lieutenant Governor of Florida, who were telling him he couldn't requisition ambulances to deliver sandwiches to people. And he said, well, they're just sitting around, no one's using them, so I'm just going to go do it. And then he went and did it. Because what are they going to do? He does, the World Central Kitchen does not really take money, at least from the government of Florida, not really from the government. So he was kind of like, interesting point. I'm just going to go do that now. And like he wants what he wants and he gets it done. And I can imagine in other circumstances where it is challenging, but it's definitely an asset in my opinion, when this is the job.
That's awesome. I'm floored by this book. I think I've said it online. I'll say it again now. I think it's one of the best graphic novels I've read all year. It should definitely be something people read, whether you're a graphic novel reader or not. It's an important story. for humanity. I think, and thank you for doing it.
Oh, well, of course. And I think the other thing to point out is like, it's not it goes without saying, it's not a cookbook, but one of the other
No.
things that I think that is also interesting or will be interesting for people is the humble nature of the recipes we do present, because this
Yeah.
is not, food as art is vital, and I consider it a creative field, but that's not what we're doing here. Like, this is food as power.
Yeah.
And sometimes that isn't looking fancy. I think there's probably people that will pick up the book and be surprised that this James Beard award-winning Michelin star rated chef has a book where he's talking about doing mayo chop and doing like a bologna and cheese sandwich. But
Right.
but that's the point. If you want the other stuff, you can buy any of his number of cookbooks. You can buy the World Central Kitchen cookbook, which is also available now. And it involves Michelle Obama's breakfast taco recipes, I believe, off the top of my head.
Right.
But this isn't that. This is the food you can this is food you can make when you get on site. You have 12 hours before a hurricane hits and you want to make 1,000 meals,
Right.
3,000 meals. And so it's food as power and food as utility. And I think that's really fascinating because it's not necessarily what people expect. I'm sure some folks will be expecting the type of thing you get in the cookbook, for example, like I said, the WCK cookbook, but this is not that. And I also think it points out the way that food can bring people together after a catastrophe, even if it's ways of diverting their attention from the catastrophe at hand. It's a small thing, but I really like the story about how, I believe it's in the Bahamas, they ended up doing a conch salad contest.
Yes.
Everybody there
I love that story.
salad, and it was a way, it was a way to get people fed, but also get people excited and take their minds off and that's not to say to ignore it, but listen, trust me, when you're in a natural disaster, everybody knows. They know. And
Right.
so even if it's like a couple moments or a couple hours of just normalcy, right? I really enjoyed the conch salad anecdote.
Yeah, and that's another thing. There are small recipes in the book. It's not a cookbook. But the recipes that are there. It's interesting, and I love the paella theme that runs through it. Like, it's that thing that comes from his boyhood, nature, and it's something that I know isn't very important to him as a food. But like, the foods that that are actually talked about in the book are um are foods that sustain you. It's not about being fancy. It's about, here's the thing that we're going to do. And the other part of it is that each of the foods that's mentioned is specific to the location. Like, every place, you can't take the same thing every place. Some things are universal to a degree, but like, there is hey, when we're here, this is the food that's here. This is the way they make the food, and we're going to try and make this as close as possible. And we're going to give them the things that they need. We're going to get it locally. We're going to try and do those things. And I think that's important to the story as well.
Well, and yeah, though, get it locally is also, that's just not like a cool hipster marketing thing in this book. That's a way to immediately get money back into the community.
And then replanting, and then letting it go back in. So when you're done leaving, you're not just walking away. You're like, hey, you can't make it anymore. Let's help you get back to where you were as best as they can, obviously.
No, for sure. I think that's I think what is unique, and again, what I learned doing that is, and people will see this theme in many books that I wrote, by the way, because 5 years ago is when I did this with Jose. This book was in production for those 5 years. But this concept of how we help people, it was in Justice League of America, it was in Wonder Woman, it's in Scarlet Witch, the Prince Valiant issue. But that's because it's really how I feel about it now. That honestly was the most stunning thing to me, this idea, because I myself am an egotistical shit. So the idea that, of course, Jose, but all of us, we go, you go and you. It's easy to think, well, look at me, right? Like, I'm going to tell these people have nothing, so they should accept what they're getting, and I'm going to tell them what they need. But that's diametrically opposed to what actually helps. And as we talk about in the book, like this idea that you go and you enter with humility, and you listen to the people who are in need to tell you what they need, rather than telling them what you've assumed they need. And look, Jose talks about that in the book because he himself learned that very early on in Haiti. But I think about that a lot now, and that's, it's fundamentally changed how I write, not just about real world people and food and the stuff I like outside of Capes Comics. it's changed how I write Capes comics. Like I'll never, I didn't write it when I was there, but I never would have written Wonder Woman just going in and explaining to people how they, what they need, especially not Diana, because she should already know this. But that fundamentally changed how I view aid. We even, you probably noticed, Bob, because you were a details guy, that we basically have Bishop quote this book in the Mutant First Strike thing. I paraphrased it a little bit, but that to me is the most fundamental. And now, of course, I don't have the quote exactly in front of me, but I'm going to look it up as we're talking. But it changed how I think about a lot of things. So the quote is that charity is not about the redemption of the giver; it's about the liberation of the receiver.
Yeah.
And we have Bishop say a version of that in Mutant First Strike. Wanda, we shouldn't say that, but we pivot to a different phrase and how and a different concept and then upend what people might think about it. But it's been like a fun. It's changed the way I think in macro ways, like we're talking about, but even in micro ways, where I will like get into arguments with my parents now because they get offended if they give a gift and then don't get a thank you note. And to me, if you're I'll say, like, if you're giving a gift with the expectation of the note, then you're actually just giving a gift to yourself.
Right.
The note should be a bonus, but not expected, because otherwise you're really just trying to put, you guessed it, yourself over for giving the gift. So that's, you asked me what surprised me, what changed me. That's the real answer. It took me a while to get to it, but like the top to, I shouldn't say top to bottom, holistically, that sort of changed my worldview in a lot of ways.
That's fantastic. That's excellent. I want to get to some of the themes of your writing about some other things. I want to kind of pivot to that at this point. There are times when people write comics, especially licensed comics, right, that are they're primarily writing that comic because they're getting paid to. It's been the case for decades. You get an assignment, you're writing this. It's not because this is your favorite character and this is what you've been waiting to do. Someone has to write the books, and every book someone writes can't be that person's favorite character. But I've noticed that a lot of the work that you've done at Marvel over the last couple of years has been involving characters exploring who they are and who they need in their lives, from Wanda to Bobby to the Marauders. What makes comics the place for that exploration? And have you found that exploration to be interesting?
Well, of course I find it interesting. I think I don't mean to cop out, but I don't think comics are uniquely the place for that. I think that's what real storytelling is.
That's the answer. That's the right answer.
I happen to be a comics writer for the most part. But I think that it's like you got to go right up to the line with comics. At the same time, like we're really just giving people the illusion of change. And trust me, like I'm a reader who would be happy if Bruce Wayne died in Final Crisis and never came back and Dick Grayson was still Batman. But that's not.
I wouldn't be terribly upset with that myself, but
that's not everybody. Certainly, and you're like creating this perpetual motion machine where it seems like people are changing and evolving, but they're kind of changing and evolving in this wide arc where they come all the way around. And so to me, the challenge is, so you want to infuse as much real character and real reflection into that as you can, while of course still maintaining the what the job is, at least when it comes to Cape Comics. But to me, like again, like if you're not, everybody writes differently, but to me, that's what real storytelling, that's what storytelling is. And folks deserve characters who are thinking about themselves and thinking about the things they're doing. Unless, of course, it is in character for them to be thoughtless. But for the most part, That's true.
I mean, that's my point. The point is that, you're writing characters that have a history and are going to have a future. And that's not all of that do you have any say over. But the time that you have with them, I find that you are pushing them a little bit. I don't know if it's pushing, but it just seems like they are exploring that. They're not just saying, okay, this is what I've always been, and I'm going to stay here, and I'm just going to punch this next guy who shows up in front of me. Right? That's what a good comic book writer does. They don't just, the plot is not the story. Someone said that. I saw someone say that recently, and it's very, very important. I keep harking back to it lately.
Well, yeah, because I mean, it's like if all you're waiting for is the next big reveal, or so you can update your wiki scorecard,
which is a lot of what people are experiencing with Marvel fatigue, and their concept is like, oh, I just need to see who's going to show up in this movie instead of paying attention to what they're trying to tell you in the movie.
Yeah, so I will say as well, I don't necessarily think that's 100% the fault of folks who are doing that. I mean, like that, if that is what's happening, it's happening because that's been rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
But
absolutely,
this way, like one of my favorite single issues of all time, two of my favorite single issues of all time, would honestly probably would not fit the bill, right? Of having like a major reveal. The Day in the Life issue of All-Star Superman. I mean, we referenced it in Scarlet Witch 9, but there's nothing major about Clark revealed there. I mean, there actually is a ton revealed about him, but not in a plot sense. You don't, in a character sense, there's an immense amount of stuff revealed about him because you see how he interacts with tens and hundreds of people throughout the day. But there's no big revelation. He's dying at the beginning of it. I guess spoilers for a 20-year-old book. He's dying at the beginning of it. He's dying at the end of it. And the same goes for, of all things, I love the Martian Manhunter 1 million issue, which was drawn by Brian Hitch and written by John Ostrander. And it's essentially Rashomon with John Jones as the subject. It takes place in the future where he, I guess, again, spoilers for a 25-year-old comic. Martian Manhunter is Mars at that point. And there's a giant storm, and these three warriors take shelter in a cave, all who've come to pay homage to John Jones, who's helped them in different ways. And they all talk about his effect on them, and they all disagree. It's kind of like the Legends of the Dark Knight episode of the cartoon, because they all say, well, you don't understand him at all. Here's who he really is.
Right.
And the reality is that he's all of those things.
Yeah.
And of course, at the end they zoom out in a very John Ostrander moment. What I love, you zoom out, and the cave itself is John's ear, and he's listening to all of them.
Right. Very John. I love him so much.
But yeah. So but those are two of my favorite issues ever. And again, it's not like they're character pieces. It's not like there's major revelation.
Absolutely.
But
I agree with you. Those are the issues that you find and you love. That my favorite issue of all time is not. There's no supervillain in it. It's a superhero comic, but it's about people and family, and it's about it's one of my favorite issues of all time is New Teen Titans number 38, which is the who is Donna Troy story. The first
story. Right on. I was actually just about to say, like, I'm thinking, like, I feel like in the modern day of, like, I dread reviews in the modern day of, like, even iconic issues like The Kid Who Collected Spider-Man. I could say, oh, nothing happens here, right? Even though, and like, no, it's literally one of the most influential single issues of all time. But that being said, I just wrote Donna, so please go on about Donna Troy.
Yes. Well, it's a great. Are you familiar with that issue?
I am familiar. Listen, I've not read it in a long time.
No, I understand.
But yeah, I did read it. I did that. New Teen Titans was mostly a 90s run for me, so it has been a long time.
Yeah, it was.
Or 90s read, rather. Pardon me.
Yeah. It was the issue before Dick Grayson stopped being Robin, and it was basically him using all of the detective skills he ever had to discover how Donna had ended up in Paradise Island and Themyscira, which wasn't called Themyscira at the time, and what her true history was. And it's the concept of she shouldn't have been in the building that was burning, and then going back further and further and further. And there's a moment in it. It's a very beautiful moment that George drew, where she sees her actual mother, or the woman who adopted her, because her actual mother died basically soon after she was born, because she was very sick. But the woman who adopted her and raised her for a short period of time and then couldn't keep her and so Donna was taken from her as an infant. They see each other, they run across the field, they slam into each other and hug. The leaves fly up. It's a gorgeous moment. It is the same image that Phil Jimenez used in Rebirth when Barry and Wally come together and hug.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw that image that Barry and Wally had put together, and I sent it to Phil, and I'm like, I sent the picture of Donna and her mother coming together, and I said, this reminds me of that. And he's like, it should, because that was so iconic. But yeah, it's not about fighting villains, or, you know, I mean, they're bad people and they get, you know, in trouble, but it's about finding yourself, finding where you come from, and it's all from the perspective of Dick helping. You know, that's one of my favorite books. But whatever. I want to talk about your stuff. I want to talk more about yours. I want to talk about. Let's talk about Wanda. Let's talk about this experience that you've had writing Scarlet Witch. It's been eventful. It's been, besides the books that have come out and the story that you've been telling, it's been eventful in the business aspect of it. What have you felt from it?
From the book itself?
Yeah, from the experience of writing the book and everything that went around it. Like, how does it? And I have a quote for you when you're done with that.
Oh God. Well, look, writing the book has been great. I think that Wanda has been on a journey. She's on a journey. Like, there will certainly be a peak to come in Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. I think she, you know, I've been talking, like, I did some interview somewhere, and noted that she almost has had like an overcompensatory form of confidence ever since dealing with Chthon and dealing with the trial of Magneto. And she's been lucky in that's been working out for her, but that's about to come to a head in Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. And, you know, like, I mean, I wrote Wonder Woman, but Diana's better than me. Like, Diana is the person that I wish I could be.
Sure.
Donna's more like her. Wanda is more like me. Like, you know, I've fucked up things happen to me in my life, and I go through these peaks and valleys of you know, like many of us do. Like, she's like, I'm great, I'm so great, and like, but are you? You know, like to an extent. You know, like, and I'm a very competitive person, so I'm always trying to prove how well I'm doing and things like that. So Wanda, I mean, listen, I could write this book forever. I don't have phenomenal cosmic power like her, but I do see a lot of myself in her. She's probably still a little better than me. I can be a vindictive guy. But, you know, so can she if her family is in danger and things like that. And we'll see that coming up. But that being said, like, it's an important book to me, and not just because of, you know, we get to see her do wild things, and, you know, like things like the Prince Valiant issue, which is one of my favorite issues I've ever done, just because it was a little different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a book about chosen family, and I think that's an important concept. Look, I'm not here to relitigate the events of what was it, Axis or whatever. Like, I'm not here to relitigate the one in Pietro retcon as much as the internet wishes that we would, or I could. But the fact is that to me, that's an opportunity. You know, there's a lot there, regardless of what you think about how that went down, it's made Wanda and Pietro more unique. There are less blended family and less chosen family narratives in comics than there are traditional biological family narratives. So
Sure.
I actually think that it's made her story much more powerful, and I think opened her up to audiences that maybe didn't know about her before. Like, chosen family is such an important thing in a lot of marginalized communities, especially the queer community. But many communities. And so, like, that's been a great inroad for me into her character, but it's also just something that, I mean, it's important to me in my own life. Family is very important to me in general. And it's really made me understand her in a new way. And that's something I could write about for a long time. And also because, you know, family isn't always peachy, you know, and you'll see in Scarlet and Quicksilver, she and Pietro have been doing really, really well recently. Of course, Lorna as well.
Right.
And there's a danger to that you'll see that brings the villain into the issue. But, you know, no matter how well you do, like, you know, at least with my own family and probably most cases, like, the minute you do get into a fight, those are the people that know exactly how to piss you off. Yeah, because they have years of practice. So things are going great, but when the inciting incident happens in Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, she's like, "Oh, holy fuck!" He knows exactly. Like, "Oh, I just wish I could,"
Yeah.
But that's what siblings and family is like. When things do finally get nuclear, you pull out a knife from 15 years ago and jab it in, because you know that it'll get someone. So I just think the relationship is very unique. It's very real, not just under my pen, but under what Jed is doing, under, of course, what Stephanie did when Wanda had the guest appearance with Aurora in our second issue. It's really like, look, it's been a joy to write the book because it's a character that I really got to know in a new way. I was a fan before, but through a more traditional, like, oh, wasn't she amazing when I was watching Iron Man as a kid type of way. Now I feel like I have an adult appreciation of her that is much more multifaceted.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact. I love the set piece for the way that you developed this story. I love the concept of the door. I love the way that was the way that you could get through from story to story. But bringing all of the people that you brought into the series so far, particularly Lorna, I thought that was really cool. I loved her showing up, and I love that the interaction between the two of them, because it's not rare. I mean, it is rare. It's very, very, very uncommon for them to interact. Throughout, I think some of the best, interactions was what I saw in that book.
Well,
what I wanted,
it'll be a little bit, but I believe she'll be back sometime next year. I know
okay.
that's 12 months of time.
And I'm a big fan of both of them for separate reasons. They're people I like separately, but I like the concept that they were together.
Well, I want to match up. There's things that I haven't done yet that I think are really interesting that I don't know if we'll have time for, but it's always interesting to me that what people focus on. And I like to, of course, I like to give people the comfort food. But I like the surprising dishes as well. Like,
Sure.
We hinted at it very slightly in issue 6, but everybody talks about Billy and Tommy being Wanda's kids. But fewer people talk about the fact that if they're Wanda's reincarnated kids, they're also Vision's reincarnated kids. And also fewer people talk about the fact that they have biological parents and other biological siblings that
Right.
we just don't talk about that much.
Yeah, it's a crazy situation, and it's one of the weird parts about, it's one of the weird things of comics. Comics are, bizarre. And I had this conversation with my wife recently and was explaining, well, partially because of the Marvels. I was talking about the Young Avengers and how they came about, and I just want to, I really enjoyed that run. And then explaining Billy and Tommy, we saw them there, but they're not real, but they might be real, but they might be hers, and who knows, and how that works out. But then,
hey, Wanda just did that same trick with Joseph, so
right.
He could show up somewhere again, or he could just live in a fishing village in Maine. We'll see what happens. But
the quote I was getting at, and this is kind of talks about the business part of this, is I saw on one of the sites that I use to keep track of what's coming out. A comment was, I will likely get this miniseries, and this is about Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. I would like to get this miniseries, but frankly, it pisses me off. It's only 4 issues. It literally could have been number 11, 12, 13, and 14.
And you're telling me this quote because it should excite me?
No, I want you to give, I'm giving you the opportunity to explain that in any way you feel like it.
Well, the way I feel like it is not the way I should.
Okay.
Well,
then how?
Look, the reality is, well, no, you know what? I think, look, the thing is that the book is doing well. However, if new number ones didn't always pop a number, publishers wouldn't do them. Like at the end of the day, if an issue 11 sold the same as even an issue 2, you would then get an issue 12. So in the same way that I noted that, like, I don't think that power scaling wiki type people are necessarily, like, I mean, first of all, there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you like. There might be something wrong with the way you express it. but there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you like. But that's also been rewarded, you know, by in the same way. There are multiple arrows pointing with the behaviors of publishers constantly doing new 4-issue series and things like that. Because again, if issue if issue 2 didn't traditionally have like a 50% drop off from issue 1, which is the most industry insider thing I'll say, most issue 2s drop 50% across the board from issue 1.
Sure. I think 50% is, I think a lot of people would like 50%
or more. Yes. So like, and of course, if an issue 11 sold like that new issue 1 that could have been issue 11, you would get issue 11. You know, like that is supported by the behavior of the general reading populace. Like not everybody, of course, but that is a factor.
No, it's fair, and it is the business that you're in. It's the business that we're in. It's the reason why I do a new number ones column every week. You know, because there's always new number ones coming out.
I'll say personally, I wish books had legacy numbering and arc numbering.
Sure,
which hypothetically,
arc numbering is a great idea.
Some places do, but that would give you your new number 1. But we also should be rewarding our readers that have been with us. Well, in the case of Wanda, since last year, but earlier this year rather. But I mean, going back, like if you've been reading Uncanny since 1964 or whatever, then right. I would love for you to be able to see what issue, the inevitable, I'm not breaking news here, but the inevitable next Uncanny X-Men number 1 is in your frame of reference. And then for people who needed to be new number 1 because they feel intimidated by reading X-Men number 756, which by the way, I understand as well.
Sure.
Then you have that numbering there too. To me, that is the ideal. It's what I wish we could do. And hopefully we'll end up doing it eventually.
Sure.
Or at least some places are already doing it. Hopefully
doing
it.
Do you know off the top of your head, what book you have written the most issues of?
I bet you do.
I do.
I would assume it's Justice League because I did 29 issues plus that annual.
Yep. I think it's 31 to be honest with you, because I think they may have included Milk Wars or whatever. But
and then we did all the Rebirth issues too. Yeah, it's probably in the 30s. Although I will I can't say that. We're coming up on being the longest run of Scarlet Witch. We're not there yet, but it's possible that we are set to be there anyway.
That's good. I'm enjoying Iceman. I find the character development you're doing there to be really, really interesting, given the circumstances you were presented with.
Yes, thank you. It wasn't exactly a happy-go-lucky time for Iceman and Fall of X. So we're finding it where we can, at least. Listen,
I mean, I'm not gonna. It was known that an Iceman book was coming out before the Hellfire Gala happened. But when the Hellfire Gala happened, I'm like, what the fuck are you gonna do with this? Right?
Me too. For many, many months.
How are you? What is this challenge meant to you in taking on Bobby?
I mean, like I try not to be the character that like only writes queer-led books, and I'm lucky that I don't have to be. But that being said, what I try to do is never repeat myself, and what I try to do is not write books that are necessarily quote unquote. When there's pathos in a book I write, it's rarely due to the character's queerness. Like Bobby is not in his position that he's in because he's gay, and because that's just how like I hope that we're treated in actual life. I try to treat the characters I would like to be treated myself. So my hope is that when you pick up one of these books, Iceman included. It's not necessarily about trotting out his coming out story. This doesn't mean we're ashamed of it. There'll be people that say it's quote unquote about being gay because he is gay in the book. They're just wrong and stupid.
Right.
But we're not belaboring. We're not doing gay trauma and things in this book. These are things I try to avoid. And I always just try to give a spotlight to something new within the experience. For me, like the issue where he goes back to Long Island, that's kind of like that's the new
Mm,
thing. I couldn't tell that story about going home. It wasn't Bobby's high school reunion like mine. It was a reunion of another kind, but like going back as this new, fully realized person and confronting the people that gave you shit 15 years ago, some of whom have evolved and some of whom think it's still 15 years ago, right?
right.
So I try in the case of Iceman and all these things to say something uh, different and something new. Because if folks are going to ask me to write these books, which I'm happy to do, they deserve to have new types of stories told with these characters.
What was interesting about that concept of going back to Long Island is not he didn't go back, and people have done this. People have written about him going back, and the fact that he's now gay and openly gay, being the thing people talk about him going back. And what you did was had nothing to do. His sexuality had nothing to do with people's reaction to him there, which I thought was refreshing and wonderful, and exactly what it should have been.
Yeah, I mean, and some people are fine with it, and then as we saw, the mayor is still an asshole, right? Like there's always there's
people
always
are assholes.
Yeah, well, of course, but there's always that dude when you go home that still thinks it's senior year, and they're like, "Oh, hey, dude," I'm like, "Well, my man, like that shit was a lifetime ago. Like maybe leave your hometown, right?" So like, yeah, I'm very proud of that issue. I really like. I mean, I believe issue 4 comes out this week. I say I believe because we in the holiday season have to put things to print so early that it is kind of hard to keep track of when they hit stands. But that being said, I really like the chance to write Spider-Man and Iceman as well, and to reflect on eras where. I mean, I think that maybe it's absurd to say, but maybe not. Like, there's an emotional maturity to Peter and Iceman's interaction in the book that I'm really proud of. It happens after the quipping, of course, that happens.
Sure.
But I think that that's something special about their friendship that Bobby can draw out that side of Peter and so on and so forth. So I'm very proud of that issue. And then issue 5 is it's a knockdown, drag out fight between him and Mr. Clean, and it's nasty. It is it's not full Midnighter, but it's an aggressive fight, and I'm very proud of that as well. Joe Casey texted me. He's excited anybody remembered Mr. Clean. I was like, well, I'm your man.
I'm sure. Well, speaking of that, I want to get to this. Some of the other stuff you have coming up in January. There's a quick Spider-Man 2099 series coming out. It's weekly, right?
Yes, 5 issues weekly. Miguel
and when I mentioned earlier that there, a lot of times, you're in a situation where you're working for a company and they ask you to write about a story. It's not always your favorite character, but I know Miguel is one of your favorite characters, and the opportunity to write this. What do you want to tell people about this book coming out?
Well, yeah. So I mean, like, you don't always get to work on your favorite characters, but 2099 is one of my favorite things ever. Sure. Yes, Miguel, but we need to mention X-Men 2099 as well.
Sure.
So I'm going to write that for as long as I can.
And from the solicitation, I think Blade 2099 is in this one as well.
Yes. So each issue is a one-off that is I'm pairing in different ways, because I'm not going to say Miguel's fighting them in all cases, but pairing in different ways Miguel and one of the classic Marvel horror concepts, which we're updating for the cyberpunk future of 2099. So we have zombies in the first issue, we have Dracula in the second, we have a new Werewolf by Night in the third, the fourth, we have Terror Inc. It's possible me and the editor Mikey Basso are the world's biggest Terror Inc. fans.
It's possible.
So I was really excited. And that's just, I mean, it is Terror. It's Terror, and he's lived through to 2099. But he has like a John Wick style sommelier that gives him different body parts for depending on what he needs. You'll see when the issue comes out. And then we have Man-Thing for the 5th issue. So I mean, it's a blast getting to make these new characters. And as you noted, the only thing better than that is when you get to see them return. And so we do have Blade 2099 in the zombie issue. It just felt right because he is half zombie,
right.
So we're introducing a new type of zombie. You'll see how that fits in the book. That is sort of a response to the classic Romero type zombie. And who better to help Miguel with that than Blade 2099. Love that character. And I will say as well, like speaking of the joy of seeing these characters go on, I sent the issue to Justin Mason, who co-created Blade 2099 with me. And he was just over the moon to see Dev Malya drawing his design and seeing Blade live on. So that is one of the joys of this business. I love the zombie issue. I think, as I said, Dev Malya is a perfect artist for Spider-Man 2099. It's got Night of the Living Dead allusions. It's got just so much stuff. It's mean in a way that that almost has a little bit of a Sam Raimi tinge. And at the same time, we get to build some stuff, start to rebuild the relationship between Conchata and Miguel. Conchata is Miguel's mom, for folks who don't know. So it's been a blast. And the question is just, when can I get back to these characters? I mean, we got Blade back. I'm dying to use the new X-Men 2099 characters again, because I loved working with them for what little time we could. So hopefully there's a lot more, but I'm incredibly excited for folks to see this. I'm proud of all the issues. We just sent the zombie one to print, and it is a banger. It's one of my 2 favorite issues of 2099 I've written. The other one is the X-Men issue of Exodus, so everyone should go check that out. But yeah, and it's just fun exploring these new corners of the 2099 universe.
No, it's great. It's great. Listen, it is your jam. It is not mine. But if I'm going to read 2099, I want you to be writing it. So let's put it that way.
Well, you should read. You should check out Peter's Symbiote Spider-Man 2099 when it comes out as well. But I appreciate it, and hopefully I will continue doing it in the future.
I want to talk a little bit about Sainted Love. The very visual Sainted Love is how I described it to you earlier.
Yeah, you read that when you were sitting outside of a daycare, right? Is that true?
I am glad I didn't. But
sitting outside of a church and just your car and stuff.
Listen, you know my wife, and I just flipped the pages for her, and she's like, and her expressions just continued to change. So, but it's wonderful. Is there room to continue to travel beyond the first arc? In this story?
Absolutely.
Are you hoping for that? I mean, I would love to see that.
No, I'd love to. I think a lot of it will depend when our collected edition hits, as is the truth with many independent comics.
Is that that's an interesting concept? Can you explore that? Like, the collected edition makes a big deal about going forward. Is that true?
Well, I mean, the books need to make money to continue.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm not breaking news here. And
no.
The fact is that just like people keep buying new number 1s more than they buy number 11s, people buy more big 2 books than they buy indie books. So it's easier, of course, for a big 2-back book to continue in periodical format. It's much harder for the indies. So the importance of the collected edition is paramount for any independent publisher, not just me, like whatever book you're loving. Especially pre-orders on the collection, but purchase of the collection in general can really make a difference in a way that it may not in the big 2, because the metrics are different. Sure. So it really does make a difference for independent books.
So I have a question about your process, and if you can share it. You are writing, we've just talked about like 8 different books you're working on. Do you have a work schedule? Like, when do you know what book you're working on each day? Do you work on multiple books each day, different hours? Do you put time in that way? How do you address that for you?
I for sure. I mean, not all of us keep a rigid schedule, but because my boyfriend's a teacher,
and that's why I'm asking you particularly.
Yeah. So for me, because my boyfriend's a teacher, I try to be working between 8 and 9 every day, and then be done between 5 and 6 every day. Unless, of course, I have to go on podcasts at 8 o'clock at night. But
sorry, Michael.
I don't care. I'm here. But
I'm not apologizing to you.
But so I try to do that, and for the most part, it works. As to what I work on, I always have an A thing I need to get done every day, and that's 1 book at a time.
Okay.
Or part of 1 book at a time. Like today, for example, I had to do 1/4 of a Scarlet Witch thing that's not announced yet.
Mhm.
Um, a Scarlet Witch thing that's not announced, but should be pretty obvious for folks who read the press release. So once again, I'm not breaking news; it's all right there. For when Rich Johnson watches this and is like, "Oh, Steve Orlando," like, well, the news has been
Rich
out.
doesn't watch my show.
The news has been out for 6 weeks, folks. But anyway,
Yeah.
but there's always surprise things. So yes, like I always have a top line project is what I call it, my mandatory work for the day. But there's always, I mean, I had to do that today, but then I had to review 100 pages of PDFs from different comics that are going to print and do lettering notes on those. And then I'll usually have to work a little bit on outline for the future so we continue to write comics, continue to make our mortgage and things like that. So there's always a top line, but then the B project, the tertiary stuff changes every day, and sometimes it'll just pop up. That's the nature of the business.
I got a couple more things I want to talk about. One is the work that you're doing with Mirka and Adolfo at Distillery. I think that's kind of interesting. Can you talk about like how that how you're stretching yourself to work on translation as opposed to story? Like,
well, okay, so
and is it rewarding? How tell me about that.
It is, but what I do for Arancha and which includes the work for Distillery is localization, not translation. So the difference,
I was aware of that. I saw someone mention translation, so that's why I used that word, and I apologize for that.
No, but folks may not know. Like many people don't know. Even my peers sometimes don't know what I'm doing when I say that. So it's not a problem at all. But what that is essentially like my friends at Arancha are Italian folks who speak English. They will take a work, usually theirs, but sometimes one that they've licensed to release in America or things like that. And they'll do the Italian to English translation themselves.
Mhm.
But that's a rough, they don't know all the nuances of English. They don't know all the idioms. They don't know all the cultural differences for the English speaking world, especially America, so on and so forth. So what I do then is I come through and I will polish those rough translations of the script. And my job there, and it is rewarding because my job there is almost more like an editorial job. The job of editorial is to help us be the best versions of ourselves and to make the story the best version of the story that the creative team wants to tell. My job as a localizer is to take, be it Mirka, be it David Goy, whoever I'm working with, and to make their script the best and most evocative version of the script for the English-speaking audience. So I love doing it. I mean, it's a completely different thing than I do with writing. And I love it. It is relatively less time consuming, but just as rewarding.
Well, I think it's really important. I think it's something that, so I've mentioned this on multiple podcasts to multiple people and over the time. There's a book that I wanted to love so much. It is visually stunning, and yet I couldn't read it. I couldn't read it for two reasons. One was that the font that the letterer decided to use was horrible.
Well, that one I can't control, but
the second part was that I knew that it was translated. I knew that the writer was not American, not native English speaker, but I could tell that it was translated because the writer is Spanish, and I speak enough Spanish to know when the translation to English was a ham-handed direct translation where I knew what they wanted to say, but they said the direct translation, which takes you out of it if you're able to do that. So
yeah, I mean that's how we get all your base R belongs to us going like that.
Right, exactly.
And a good localizer would rephrase that to say
exactly. And that's what I'm saying. It's very important. It can make a difference in the reader's experience, and I think that's important. I'm glad you're doing it. Thank you for doing it.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to.
I love it.
Good.
I have the smallest fraction of a Harvey Award because I participated in Sweet Paprika, and we and
there you go.
Absolutely,
one. Yes.
It's fractional. It's like my fractional Eisner for Love Is Love.
That's true. That's true. Everybody counts.
It's like 1/788th of an Eisner.
That's fair. The last thing I kind of want to talk about with what you have going on, and if whatever you can talk about, and you kind of mentioned it in the private chat, like it is here, so it is behind me. So we have a little bit of this.
Oh, double Ken the Eagle. Look at
Double
you.
Ken the Eagle.
Yeah, we're doing Gotcha Man with Mad Cape starting in 2024. I'm one of 3 writers on the line, and I say the line because there's a lot of stuff coming. And I should put Cullen over. Cullen Bunn is writing the main book with Chris Batista, arguably the world's biggest Gotchamon fan. Chris Batista.
I'm not sure how much of an argument it is. I mean, I had a long conversation with him about it. I've reached out to Cullen about it. I am a huge fan as well, so I'm very excited about the fact that you guys being able to do this. And there's been, not a lot of information put out. What can you tell us? Like, I know the concept that has been said is that you and Tommy Lee are going to be writing the one shots and mini series tie-ins. Like, what does that mean? Like, do you have actual topics lined up, things that
yeah, we all know exactly what we're going to do.
Right. Okay.
So Cullen is writing the main book.
Which is at least 2 years plotted out, right? Like that's what I think Mike said. Mike Marks.
Yeah, that sounds accurate. I mean, I say sounds accurate because I think we've only seen the first year internally, but that being said, so he'll be running the main book, and then Tommy Lee and I are both writing, honestly, as much or maybe a little more, because we're each doing 3 4-issue miniseries to start, and then 3 oversized one shots. The one shots and I'm happy to say a lot without saying anything. The one shots are all single character focused.
Okay. This is what I want. You don't have to tell me anything, but just like this is enough detail. Go ahead.
Yeah, the one shots are all single character focused, and then the minis.
This is what Rich Johnson should be listening to.
I actually can't because I don't have I'm not looking at the outline. I don't actually recall exactly what Tommy Lee's minis are about, but I can tell you what mine are about. And again, to say something without saying anything, if you looked at the way they're doing G.I. Joe, you can probably guess what at least one of my miniseries is about if you look at how they're doing the G.I. Joe line. Okay. And then from there, we'll be pulling out, again, like they'll be standalone stories that enhance or play off of or jump off of things that are happening in the main book. But
I love this concept.
They'll enrich what you're reading, but it's not like, all right, so say that I was doing one about Galactor. Like you don't necessarily have to know what's going on in the Gotchaman book. It'll be a complete story on its own. But thematically, it will connect to what's happening in the Gotchaman book. And things like that. That's what's coming out of at least my minis. The second one is featuring characters who are not on the Gotchaman team or not in the specific Science Ninja team and who are not in Galactor. And it's kind of Rogue One inspired. That should kind of tell you what it is. And my last mini is going to focus on one of the new villains and the new threats that Colin's introducing. So that's as much as I can say, but there's absolutely a plan, and we know what we're doing for the next year. Like, we're ready to rock. And I already turned in my first story. It's 6 pages. It's going to be appearing in a very prominent spotlight. One of the big industry holidays that again should be obvious.
It's obvious. We know what we're talking about.
Let's say, and it's going to be drawn by Kath Lobo, my collaborator from Dun &
awesome.
I'm very, very excited about. She's got a really good style for this world. So that's I think as far as I can go, at least in the publicly recorded version of this podcast.
That's fair. That's fair. I appreciate that. Is there anything I have?
I will tell you as well. I should give you one more thing. I'm currently in the process of negotiating with a bucket list artist to do the cover for one of these books. And if it happens, it will be one of the biggest check marks checked off that remains on my list. So that's, you may know, knowing me, who it is, Bob, but otherwise for people,
there's a couple. There's a short list I can guess.
Well, I already got a Frank Whiteley cover on my book, so like that's not it because I've already done it. Like the list is getting shorter. I'm very lucky.
That's fantastic. That's the goal.
But that being said, the point behind that is that like we are going all in on this. Mad Cave is going all in on this, and I think it's going to be really, really exciting. And if I can pester Tommy Lee enough, maybe I will get him to draw a little bit of it as well. But so far, I haven't worn him down. I have a year and a half.
That's good
to get him.
Well, that's great. there's something else, is there not? I believe there's something else you have coming that I don't know if
Well,
it's
we
been
just
announced.
announced Silver Vessels with Mad Cave, which is a
That's
YA
right.
book. My
Yeah.
first young adult book, I did Rainbow Bridge at Aftershock when I was middle grade. So it's my first young adult book, similar to Exorcist Never
So
Die.
talk to me about that. And that's an interesting concept. Like it's you characterize Rainbow Bridge's middle grade, and this new one with, I'm sorry, the name is
Silver Vessels, the Silver
Silver
Vessels.
Vessels with Mad Cave as YA. How different is that for you?
Well, I mean, what you can, it's sort of about the way you say things. I mean, in a basic sense, it's the age group, but the intended reader group. That doesn't mean they're the only readers, of course, but it's also the way you
There
say
was no
things.
age group for me when I was reading. I just read everything. Like,
I know. Well, me too. I read Watchmen at 12, and look how good I came out.
right, exactly.
Pardon me. I read Silence of the Lambs before that, and I was in 6th grade, and my English teacher, would not let me do a book report on it because it was not appropriate for me. And I was like, well, I've already read it, and she made me read another book.
Right.
But anyway, young adult, you can engage with slightly more mature themes. I shouldn't even say mature because it's still young adult, but slightly more complex themes is a better way to say it. And that's definitely on display in the Silver Vessels. And look, it was an exciting thing for me. Similar to Exorcist Never Die, it was developed right in tandem with Mad Cave. They wanted to do a book that explored the Florida Keys. They wanted to do a book about treasure hunting, and they came to me and said, Steve, how can we develop this together? And we came up with something. Yeah, I came up with something that first of all, Katya Vecchio, who drew it, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous book. People, the cover's out there. You folks can see it. And there's never, I'm not going to Miller this, but to my reckoning, there's never been a treasure hunting book that really engaged with, to be honest, the sort of problematic nature of treasure hunting. It's essentially thievery.
I think you're just bucking for the new title of King of the Edgelords.
I'd have to try a lot harder. But I'm really, really excited about it. It's gorgeous. It's going to look great on my shelf next to Rainbow Bridge. But in addition to that, it does have really something beautiful to say, and it explores the Florida Keys, something that I was excited to learn about myself. We're not all soulless. We're not all just soulless automatons making these books. Part of taking this gig and developing this with Mad Cave is because I wanted to learn about this part of history that I didn't know about. And so, along with Chris Fernandez and Lauren Hitzhausen, the editors who have been in many of the places that we feature in the book, it was just a blast to work on. And at the end of the day, it really is kind of like a modern Goonies. It's a journey of self-discovery by way of swashbuckling, treasure hunting adventure.
That sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to that. You also mentioned, and this is the kind of, everybody's been listening for a while. And we can talk. You and I can talk forever. But you mentioned, and this is kind of an interesting part in your career, is that you just wrote Donna Troy, right? And you did a lot of work early on in your career at DC, and there was when you stopped working for DC, you've now gotten back where you are, writing for them a little bit, here and there. Is that something that you want to continue? Is that something that will continue? Is there anything there? Is there anything about that, coming back to that publisher that is good or bad for you? Well, I'm sure you're not going to say. You're not going to say anything bad because you probably would like to work for them. But anyway.
Well, it's good or bad doesn't factor into it. New factors into it.
Sure.
And a lot. And I'll say this: a lot has changed since I was at DC, so it all feels fun to me. And so the answer is yes. I'd love to do more. I had a blast. I'm doing a little more. I'm writing a Dreamer with Nicole Maines. That's coming out this fall.
Okay.
We're doing a one shot. We were back up in Action Comics. But in a very literal sense, the DC universe is not the same as when I left.
Well, true.
Three events later or what have you. So it does all feel really fresh. And again, like just working on Donna was a blast. I would gladly write more with her. I was extremely proud of that issue. And even though she does do a lot of punching, you can see that we did still try to take a lateral view to what justice and what heroism looks like. I mean, at the end of the day, her camera is her most powerful weapon in that, not her lasso or her shield or things like that. So I was extremely proud of that issue. So I'd love to do more. It would be interesting. A lot of things that I hoped for when I was there before have come to pass. Things like Nubia being the queen, things like a more inclusive Themyscira. So yeah, I mean, the thing is that even the old stuff is new again. So it would be really interesting to do more there if the opportunity arises.
That's awesome. Is there anything you want to talk about? Anything I haven't touched?
I don't know. Let me look at my cheat sheet.
That's fair. I have cheat sheets.
I mean, you did good work, man. You covered nearly everything. The Bulls of Beacon Hill trade is out. I know you like that book.
I do love that book. I think people should definitely get that book. I think it's interesting because I was thinking about it today, and I'll thanks for bringing that up, because I was thinking about it today, and I was thinking about as I was reading part of Feeding Dangerously, and I was thinking about the voice that you were using, and how much I absolutely enjoyed the voice of Bulls of Beacon Hill, and how it's, I've told you this before, and I think I may have said it even publicly, that it is the most Steve Orlando, like being, we're friends, and I know who you are, and I know what it just was the most Steve Orlando thing I ever read, and that's great. I think that's fantastic, because not you write in a lot of different voices that are appropriate for the books that they're written in. That book to me was the most you coming through. That's just, and people who don't know you wouldn't know that. It would just be just as good of a book for that. So that's why it's one of my favorites. But yeah, people should definitely get that book. It's really
I mean, hey, it's possible that will be the last Aftershock book, and if it is, I will be proud to be that. Hopefully not, by the way. I love those guys. They got me through the pandemic.
Absolutely. I hope, we're friends with Aftershock, and we would love, we are looking forward to Aftershock, getting through the troubles that they're having, and hopefully, coming back on the other side of it.
It's worth noting too, like to completely pivot, since you're asking about other things, like Steve Fox and I are working on X-Men Unlimited now, and we are writing X-Men Unlimited for the duration until the end of the Krakoan era. And
interesting, yeah, that's great, and that's important. It brings up a great point that there are so many different ways today versus 10 years ago for people to get comics.
That's what I was gonna say. It's free on Marvel Unlimited, and the stories. I mean, it's always been canon. Like you saw Curse end up in Realm of X after X-Men Green. It's always been canon. But we are also, I mean, like, as folks have seen, like, we are featuring mainstay players in the Krakoan era. Our book is, or our run series, whatever you're gonna call it, is where you saw Sunfire retrieve Redroot. It's right now where you're seeing Firestar undercover in Orcus. It's going to be, we're going to have a holiday special coming up where you're going to see what the end of the year holiday is like on Arakko and how they celebrate the end of the year. And of course, as a spoiler, it's violent. And then from there, you're going to see what Sunspot has been doing. And in regards to the greater effort against Orcus, we're going to kick off like our main arc that is going to run right along Fall of the House of X and Rise of the Powers of X. And our three core characters are Danny Moonstar, Sunspot, and Thunderbird. And you piqued my mind because you were like, oh, the most Steve Orlando book. I actually think that Thunderbird is the most Steve Orlando character I've written in quite some time. I didn't create him, but even Fox will read the Thunderbird focus scripts and be like, you just like doing this guy. Like, this is natural for you. And I'm like,
see, it's funny because there's so much, and there's so much of that I didn't read the Thunderbird piece. I missed that somehow, somewhere along the way. There's so much X-Men to read, and I'm gonna have to go back and read it, because he's a character that I have always enjoyed. His brother as well, but like I was surprised when he showed up in a place where I hadn't read X-Men books in a while, so I have to go back and get that. And Danny Moonstar is also one of my favorites, so that's, I don't know.
That stuff is coming out. It's after the holiday special. I mean, but I love. Oh man, well, you've already heard. So listen, you've already seen the name of the holiday. LL dropped it in X-Men Red, so it's been teased. Folks will see what it is, and then we'll go headlong into the main arc. And but other people will be showing up there too. Betsy Braddock will be showing up. You know, a lot of people will be getting some shine. There's a little bit of like a global frequency type feel to it. Shatterstar is in it as well. And then the villains, I will say, our villains. It was the best possible scenario you can get, because we got these villains for the arc, and they hadn't really been developed that much. But then as we developed them and started to put real sort of philosophies to them and expand their powers and motivations, we came to love them. So now, like, I mean, I want nothing more than to just write a book about these villains, which is the best thing for all of y'all, because like they're fascinating characters, and hopefully that passion comes through on the screen. I wouldn't say on the page, on the screen in the case of X-Men Unlimited.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to do it. So anyway, thank you for making me have to go read stuff online, which I am not a fan of. But
well, listen, we all hope that they start doing print collections, because
I thought they were
some of them, but like, I hope folks don't think that these digital firsts are an afterthought, because I mean, we put so much into these, and
I definitely don't. I think that's it's one of the challenges of today's comic book reader, is that there are so many different places to get comics, and how do you go about it? And that's the story for their argument for a different day. But it is, I know that they're good books. I know that they're good stories. And at the end of the day, you know, you have had these conversations before, but like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who is doing what. The comic book reader, the consumer, wants a good story, wants to see a sequential story that is going to move them. And that's what I want. And that's what I want to encourage people to do. And you do a great job of it. And I want, you know, thank you for that. Thank you for spending your time with us. You know, and talking about all this cool stuff.
It's my pleasure.
All right. Well, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you, everybody. I'll keep you on to tease next week's guest. Next week's guest is a big one. And we are gonna have Eric Larson on this time next week, 8:00 on Pop Culture Squadcast Live. Mike's technical difficulties are being fixed, so I am praying that he will be there for this, and we're gonna have that going on next week. So everybody come back, and we'll have Steve back on shortly, soon enough. I don't doubt that.
I'm always here.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
My pleasure.
All right, we'll see you guys later.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?